Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast. My name's Amanda.
My name is Ryan.
And we're your hosts. And today we have a really cool guest on. We have Idahosa Ness from the Phonemic Method, and he is here to talk to us about his love of travel, his passion of learning language, the creation of his business, and a lot more.
Yeah, we were both introduced to the Phonemic Method while we were traveling South America looking for ways to not suck at Spanish. And it is one of the most effective ways. You learn the phonetics of a language through song. It's really fun and really helpful to think about learning a language through the sounds instead of focusing on conjugating things and doing all that other boring stuff. I really enjoyed talking to Idahosa and hearing more about his story, from going from someone who loved traveling to being a location-independent entrepreneur with the Phonemic Method.
Yeah, definitely. So here's Idahosa.
All right, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Idahosa. Really excited to have you. Just our backstory with the Phonemic Method is that we were traveling in South America in 2014, which was really the genesis of starting the World Wanderers podcast. And I had been kind of plugging away, learning Spanish through kind of conventional means, trying to conjugate things, do Duolingo and whatever. And then I think through the Fluent in 3 months, I found out about the Phonemic Method and your whole kind of slightly different, but in a way simpler philosophy on language learning. And it's kind of learning a language through song, and bought the Spanish Phonemic Method, started doing it, and really just fell in love with it, and then kind of evangelized for it to anyone I knew who was speaking Spanish. So it's really exciting to have the chance to talk to you about it.
Cool. Thanks for the evangelizing.
So right now you're running the Phonemic Method from Ho Chi Minh City, right?
Yes, I'm currently based in Ho Chi Minh.
Have you been living there for a while?
I got here this time in mid-December. So right now it's second week of February. And I was here last year for 3 months. But in total I've been here, I guess, 5 months. But I just got here last December. So depending on what a long time is to the listener, that is how long I've been here.
And what was it about Ho Chi Minh that made you want to settle down there?
Oh man, Ho Chi Minh is I've come to realize is my favorite place to come and have that work-life balance. So on the work side, things are a very easy city. Like when I got here for the first time last year, I was set up with my apartment, high-speed internet, a motorbike, cell phone, and everything within 24 hours of landing, and that was without any kind of planning. I just showed up there and figured it all out in a day, which is a record for any place I've been to. There's that, and then you have other kind of services like getting cleaning, cooking, just going out and just living. You can take Ubers for $1. You get emails oh, your Uber ride was 75 cents, and
so awesome.
Yeah, so is that. So that's the work side where and it's also it's a historically a large foreign kind of presence here. So, a lot of the kind of comforts a Westerner might look for, they can find here, different types of food and restaurants and really good food culture. So that's the kind of work side. I have really fast internet here, by the way, as well. But then the kind of life side as well, there's because of all these aspects of work, there's a big digital entrepreneur presence here. So this is probably the place I have the most first and second tier friends. A lot of times it feels like it's college again, just kind of walking around, hanging out with your buddies and getting food and just texting people, oh, you want to meet at the cafeteria? It's the same kind of thing going on. And so there's that going on. And then finally, I really like the people, the local people here in Ho Chi Minh. They're very friendly. It's the kind of place where people smile and say hello to you, which I've come to realize in my travels goes a very long way in your overall kind of happiness and attitude. Is just how often people smile at you. It's a very underappreciated thing. So yeah, those little things. And like I don't know Vietnamese yet, but I plan on learning it soon. And just the people themselves, Vietnamese in Saigon and like Brazilians, specifically in Rio, have come to be my two favorite like peoples of the world.
That's awesome. What were the steps that got you to Ho Chi Minh City?
Yeah, well, so I'm part of like I'm active in like location independent entrepreneur groups. One of which is called the Dynamite Circle, and we have a conference there every October in Bangkok. So there's a lot of hubs for these things, and what happens is everyone kind of converges on Bangkok for the conference in October, and then since we're already in Asia, a lot of us choose to stick around in Asia for the rest of the fall winter period. So a lot of people go to Chiang Mai, a lot of people stick around in Bangkok, and a significant number of people go to Saigon. So I decided this time around to go to Saigon. So just kind of on a whim, just based on other people were going there, and I heard good things, but I didn't expect to like it as much as I did, and I ended up loving it. And one of my best friends as well, I told him to come out here. He's also an entrepreneur, and he was like skeptical. He said, "Oh, I'll just be there for a week, and then I'll probably go to Singapore." And then he's been living here for the past year and a half. So
That's so awesome. That's great.
Yeah, so it's a lot. Everyone here loves it here. So yeah, so I just kind of stumbled upon it because other people were here, and then I fell in love with it. So I'll probably be coming back here like every year.
So you're not permanently located there then?
Yeah, I'm not really permanently located anywhere. I always do like three. I don't remember the last time I was anywhere longer than 3 consecutive months.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, because usually that's the kind of visa thing, and then some other thing will come up elsewhere that I'll choose to go to, and then while I'm there, I'll stick around in the area. So I'll be in Ho Chi Minh until May 1st. Then I'll go back to the U.S. to visit family, and then I'll probably go back to Europe in the summer.
That sounds awesome. Pretty sweet.
And you've been really living location independently for quite a while, right?
Yeah. So I started. I graduated university in 2010, and even before then, I was studying abroad like for the last 2 years. But yeah, since then, I graduated in 2010, went to Brazil. And then while I was in Brazil, had the idea for my business. And then, yeah, so basically since 2010 and, arguably 2008 and before, I've been traveling. But yeah, officially in terms of being a location independent entrepreneur, like 2011, 2012, I've just been moving to different places. And like I said, I can't remember the last time I was anywhere for longer than, I'll say 4 months consecutively.
And so when did you first start traveling? It was in university?
What do you mean by traveling? Like independent long-term travel or?
Yeah, more so.
Yeah, my first stint would have been when I was 17 actually. I figured out one day that I actually had all the credits to graduate from high school like a semester early. I just randomly stumbled upon that in my handbook at school. So I made it happen, and then I graduated a semester early my senior year of high school, and then went to Mexico. Went to Guadalajara, Mexico. I guess it would have been in January of 2006, maybe. And that was the first time I was in a country for longer than a month by myself, and prior to that, I had gone to Mexico for a 3-week program with my dad's a university professor, so I can do his things for free. And his university had some high school exchange program in Querétaro, Mexico. So I went there, and that was my first time by myself travel. My parents and my family, we traveled, at least once or twice a year. But that was my first time alone. And then that was kind of the turning point where I was like, all right, well, I got to make a point to do this for the rest of my life. So yeah, that's when I got turned on travel for real, was when I was 16.
What do you think it is about kind of moving around, seeing new places, and experiencing new countries that was so appealing to you?
Well, in the particular case of Mexico when I was 16, that was very specific because I grew up in Pennsylvania, and so I was, the people I went to school with were the same people I went to school with since I was 6. And like I wouldn't say I was like the class kind of nerd, but I definitely wasn't like the class, the cool guy who got all the ladies. So, I remember just being kind of like, Pennsylvania sucks. It's kind of a boring place. And then just by the nature of my exoticism when I got to Mexico, I got like a lot of attention. And I was like, wow, so if you just switch up your context, like everything's different, Yeah. So that was a big kind of thing for me in the state I was as a 16-year-old, like adolescent boy. But but then beyond that, it was just like going to Mexico. I remember I having the experience of learning Spanish while I was there, and just the process of like arriving in a foreign culture and everything's so alien to you, and it's very frustrating. But then you learn the language, and that's why I got into language learning, because you slowly learn the language, and the people slowly become, full human beings in your eyes. And that process of just being everything going from completely alien to completely familiar, I had fallen in love with. So I did it again in China and then Brazil, and and then kept doing it. So through travel and language learning, they kind of go hand in hand with me.
And then was there a moment when you, kind of like an aha moment when you were clicked with language learning being your passion and you were like, oh, I want to do this as a business. I want to make a career out of it.
I think, so I guess there's two kind of clicks. One click would have been, oh, I'm good at this. So I don't remember, like, I went to high school Spanish and middle school Spanish. I don't particularly remember perceiving myself as being particularly good at it while I was in middle school or high school. I think I was just doing the homework like everyone else. It wasn't a big deal. And then when I got to Mexico, I remember having the realization of like, oh, if you actually like mimic the way they sound, then you end up learning way faster. It just comes more naturally. So I noticed all my friends were still speaking with really thick accents. So I just made a point to mimic people. And then I was just learning way faster than everybody else. And then it was made apparent, and teachers and students and everyone would just kind of tell me that. And so that was and then when I learned Chinese, I started learning Chinese my freshman year. It's a similar thing where I just was learning it faster. So that was the first click of being like, oh, I'm like good at this stuff, and I actually find it very interesting. And I started to kind of self-study things in like linguistics and stuff like that in the brain. Then it was when I was a sophomore or finished my sophomore year in university that I read 4-Hour Workweek and some other things and decided that I wanted to be a digital entrepreneur. However, I didn't really have any ideas for it yet. And then it wasn't until 2010 when I was in Brazil, I learned Portuguese and had a series of epiphanies about the whole language learning problem in general for everybody, and came up with the idea for the Mimic method, that I kind of combined those two clicks into business and the solution that the problem I identified and the solution I had come up with, and the fact that you can, make a business out of that. That was the kind of final, culminating click, I suppose.
And can you tell us more about sort of like the epiphanies that you had with language learning and the things that are kind of wrong with like the standard, or maybe not wrong, but not efficient about like the regular way or the more common way to learn languages?
Sure. I'm kind of like made fun of by my friends because I have like epiphanies once a week about everything. So ever since I was a kid, I've been a very epiphanical child. But I guess the sequence of epiphanies would have been first, like I said, I was in Mexico and I was like, oh, if you just kind of mimic the accent, the grammar and vocabulary acquisition and speaking and understanding all kind of falls into place naturally. But what I assumed was at the time was that the reason why my peers weren't mimicking the accent was purely because they didn't want to. They had some kind of, prejudice or whatever, like, well, not prejudice, but, shame about sounding different, which I didn't really care about. So that's why I thought at first they just weren't trying. I'm saying like, ¿quieres más tacos? And they're like, ¿quieres más tacos? And like, I felt like they could do it if they tried. They just weren't trying.
Mm-hmm.
Then
why do you
when I
think,
started learning,
I'm just going to, sorry for interrupting, but why do you think people weren't trying? And like, or why do you think that you, like, where there's this social pressure, you're trying to look cool, maybe those other people were trying to not look like they're trying too hard, but why do you think you were able to not worry about that?
it's just nature of my personality. Like I've always been like comfortable being like an exception. It's just how I've just in lots of things, like growing up in school, I was just always doing things different. Like everyone does know that I just do things different. So I didn't have as much pressure. I think I never felt as much internal pressure as I see other people feeling to kind of conform and fit in. In fact, I kind of always identified myself as being the opposite of what everyone else is doing. So that was kind of simpler for me. And then, the main impression I got from that is in Spanish class in high school, when people were like, you're only there because you have to be there. People aren't in Spanish class in high school because they're really passionate about Spanish. It's just kind of like required. So, that was a situation. The teacher says like, yo queremos tacos. The teacher herself is an American too, so she's not really doing it that well. So then when I got to these places, I had that, and my epiphany was first, okay, pronunciation's important, accent's important. These guys just don't recognize the importance of it, and therefore they're not trying. But then I got to university and started learning Chinese, and it was, everyone knew the importance of pronunciation in Chinese. Like no one sitting in that class was like, like I don't need to get these tones right. Everyone knew it was important. Nevertheless, the majority of people could not get the tones. So that was a new epiphany, because I realized, people don't get the accent right, not just because they're not trying, it's also because they just can't do it. Mm-hmm. And for some reason I can do it and they can't. And I didn't, and I had some intuitions for why that was. When it came to tones, it only took me maybe 2 weeks or so to really nail them down. And I focused on it very intently, but, I had the intuition that perhaps my musical background gave me a sharper ear for pitch. So I was able to, and I've seen research actually that kind of backs that up. But I was like, okay, these guys just they just don't know how to develop that ear. And so I started, while I was in China and like trying to help out my friends, I started to have my own kind of like ideas about the proper way of training the pronunciation of Mandarin, and I was kind of like passing it off to my friends. And but I wasn't doing anything serious about it. Then when I came to Brazil and I started learning Portuguese, I thought, okay, here's a scenario where I already speak Spanish. Portuguese is, more or less the same language grammatically and vocabulary wise. The only difference is pronunciation, and it's a big difference. Therefore, I should just invest all my time in pronunciation and if I can get a really perfect accent before I even arrive in Brazil, then I feel like that will make a big deal. And I was already interested in Brazil for its music. I went to Brazil for 3 reasons: to train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I had already started training, learn Brazilian music, and learn Portuguese. So I went there with that intent and started learning like Brazilian music. And then through that, I realized like, oh, wow, like learning these Brazilian songs is accelerating my kind of acquisition of the accent and stuff. And then when I got there, I was conversational in Portuguese within like 3 weeks, because I was already like primed. My ears, my mouth was already primed. And then I already had the basis of like grammar and vocabulary in my Spanish. And and then while I was in Brazil, I was learning like Brazilian music, and I had this frustrating experience where I couldn't, I joined some Brazilian drum band. I couldn't like pick out the rhythms properly. And, you know, I played violin my whole life. So I always fancied myself as good at music. So I never really had a challenge like that. So I came up with a system for like breaking down the Brazilian rhythms and like reteaching it to myself step by step. And then, yeah, one day I was on a bus going home, and then all those experiences kind of just like synthesized into once again, one giant culminating epiphany but that was like my big eureka moment. And I remember I was extremely excited about it. And then I ran back to my apartment and started like scribbling out these kind of like different kind of song lessons for Portuguese and English. Ran out to the street and started like grabbing random people in the street and having them try out this like system I came up with. And like they're really like, what are you doing? And then it would actually work. So I would take songs and break them down by syllable. And my epiphany was that like the same way I taught myself these drums, note by note, beat by beat, in groups, it's just a physical movement coordinated with sound. And I realized like, oh wait, speech and pronouncing things is also just a coordinated muscle movement, coordinated with sound. Only difference is when you play musical instruments, the muscle coordination's in your hands, and when you speak, the muscle coordination's in your mouth. But like if you see your tongue like a drumstick or your lips like a violin string or whatever, it's the same basic principle. So I basically took these phrases in Portuguese and English and stuff like that, and then transcribed them as if they were songs, and then went out and then taught them as if they were songs. And then people were able to very quickly say these things with a really good accent, despite even if they didn't really know the language. So that, and then of course that synthesized with the business side of me, which I had been developing, and being like, aha, this is a really powerful solution to a very big problem. I can put this online. And I remember at the moment too, I tested it successfully like 10 times, and I was in the streets of Rio, and I threw my hands up triumphantly, like, I'm going to be rich.
I love that. That's so awesome.
And then, what were the steps like from that moment into having kind of like a legitimate business and making some revenue?
Yeah, so the getting rich part took much longer than I expected, but it's still not there yet. But yeah. So what happened was I had the idea, but because I wasn't truly exposed, I didn't really have any business skills whatsoever. Like I knew I was aware of the concept of it, and I knew I wanted to do it, but I didn't really know how to begin. I was kind of dilly-dallying for a long time. So I gone back to the U.S. and I was like kind of depressed because I had to go back to the U.S. in like February after leaving like Brazil, and you know Brazil's summertime in February. It's like carnival right now, just finished, and I go back to like I was visiting my brother in like Idaho or Iowa, whatever. I don't know where he was. And just like snow and cold and dry, and it's kind of depressed. And then like I went to DC for a while. I still lived in my friend's basement and was like trying different things out, and we're just kind of dilly-dallying for a while. And then finally I had one friend or one person in my network who was a location independent entrepreneur. I just had no idea what he actually did. And he was going to Colombia, to Cali, Colombia, in like that October, I think it would have been 2011. And I remember just making the conclusion to myself that like, if I can just work a bunch of jobs, save up money, and then go there and just like live with this guy, I'll just figure out what he does. And then maybe that will give me some insight. So I don't know. I just had a very strong intuition because I was in DC and like all my friends were graduated and they were like doing like, you know, professional jobs or med school or whatever. And I was the only person I knew who was trying to do this kind of stuff. And it's not that they weren't like, not like they were discouraging me, but they weren't like, it was the kind of thing like, oh yeah, there's Idahosa again doing his like weird stuff, you know? And, you know, it didn't make sense to anyone else. And so I was like, okay, this is one person who like, if I just surround myself with that, and that became one of my main principles in life, where it's like, surround yourself with the people you want to mimic, whether that's language or anything else in life. So I wanted to mimic this guy. So I went there. We got we shared an apartment, and and then I just lived with that guy for a while. And it was there that I finally got the insight and the drive to sit down and build out my first course, build out my guest posts. And it was when I was in Cali, Colombia that I had my first sale. And and built out my Spanish course, sold it. It was towards the end of that trip that I recorded that video of me rapping in different languages. And so that was really, so even though I had the idea back in 2010, I didn't really start the business officially until 2011.
That's awesome. That's such a cool story. And we'll definitely put that video of you rapping in different languages on the show notes for sure, because that's such an awesome video to watch.
Right.
Yeah, very cool video. And your point about surrounding yourself with the kind of people you want to be like, we can both definitely relate to. We're kind of trying to make a transition from leaving our corporate jobs in Calgary, Canada behind and trying to pursue an alternative lifestyle. And it's definitely, like you said, it's not always like people aren't supportive, but you just kind of, it's not met with like excitement or interest or like, oh, you're doing this other business thing. Like, that's cool. Which you get when you find that network of people and your like new risk-taking things are met with excitement. That's like a really nice place to be.
Yeah, and even beyond excitement, I'll tell you what you don't anticipate, maybe even more powerful than excitement, is normalcy. Yeah. So, for example, if I go to the cafe right now, I'm going to meet a friend in an hour, and for example, I just bought a website, and I just finalized the deal like on my last Skype call, and I'm going to get dinner with a friend, and I'm going to sit down and I'm like, oh, by the way, I bought this website. He's like, oh, cool. What was the blah blah blah, and like he already understands the concept, and we just talk about it the same way maybe people in Calgary would talk about something that like, oh, my boss did this or my coworker did this or like this, there's things that you just take normal part of life and no one even like raises their eyebrows at it. That was the experience I had in Colombia that first time, where I remember when I got my first sale and I was shocked. I couldn't believe anyone would pay me. And the first sale, actually, funny enough, was for like, this guy paid me $100 for like a Chinese like lesson. And I was like, I can't believe anyone would pay me, some like random black guy from Pennsylvania, $100 for Chinese. And like, it was just so crazy. And then like, I went back home and my friend was there and I was super excited. And I'm like, hey, someone just sent me $100 on PayPal, blah, 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 blah. And, you're just like completely like non-phased by it. Like, yeah, that's how it begins, And so to him, getting money on PayPal is just a fact of life. And that makes it, I don't know, when we take it for granted. We talk about a lot here, like in Ho Chi Minh, like when we go back home, we have to kind of watch how we speak because we get used to talking about these things as if it's everyone's reality when it's not. And I think when something's normal, you don't second guess it at all because it's normal, So being around, and what's normal is 100% decided by your environment, and it's completely subjective, and arbitrary. So if you want something to be your normal reality, then being around other people who normalized it is a very quick way to do that.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with me, which is pretty cool. And so, how many languages do you speak now?
6.
And that's Spanish, English, Chinese, Portuguese.
And then I learned French, and then just this past fall, I learned German.
And so did you use, I know you were talking about how pronunciation was really key when learning the language. Did you use song for those? Or was that something that kind of came in Brazil when you were really like learning how to play the drums there?
For which ones? All of them, or just?
I guess like each of them. Like, did you use song for any of them? Or
yeah, in Spanish, I remember like my teacher in Mexico had taught us some songs, and I remember that having like a strong effect on me. So that would have been like the original like idea would have came from that. Like, learning those songs really helped my Spanish. In Chinese, I didn't really learn any songs because there wasn't any songs that were really appealing to me. It was mostly pop music. But then Brazil, I went specifically for music. So that one, that's all I did before I got there. I just learned songs, and And like, of course I saw a few, like I looked up a few kind of things about the grammar and stuff. Once again, the grammar was all mostly the same. So for Portuguese is purely song. And then same for French. I learned the very first thing I did was I learned phonetics, and then I applied that through song. And then same for German. But to be clear, it's not so much that you learn songs and all of a sudden you can magically speak the language. Mm-hmm. The idea is that you learn the sounds and then you entrain those sounds, because creating sounds is a motor movement. It's a muscular process, and the only way you can learn motor movements is through lots of repetition. And the only time that repetition is fun and engaging is in music. So that's the logic there. So when I learned Portuguese, for example, I learned a bunch of songs, and as a result, each time I sang it, like in the shower or like walking places, mm-hmm. then I was building up that muscle memory. So when I got to Brazil, there's people who go to Brazil and they struggle with the pronunciation and like the nasal sounds for years. I had already like mastered it 90% by the time I even got there, before I even set foot in the country. Wow. Which means that when you speak to people, you can mimic. And that's why it's not called the song method, it's called the mimic method. Yeah. Because the actual acquisition of vocabulary and grammar and expressions is done by listening to native speakers and just repeating what they say and attaching it to whatever the context is. But it's really difficult to do that if your ears can't process the sounds and your mouth can't create them.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. It's interesting for me because like Ryan and I kind of learned Spanish on par with each other while we were traveling South America. And then he came across the mimic method when we got home and was kind of doing it like we were working shift work, so we weren't home at the same time a lot. We're in the car one day and he throws on this Spanish song and like he knows all the words and like his pronunciation, like he sounds Spanish. And I was like, what is happening? And he's like, it's this mimic method that I keep telling you about that's like so effective. And it was like, I was just blown away. Like he's like listening to me speak and he's like, I can hear that you're like not putting your tongue here with your D's and that's why you're sounding like English Spanish. And I was like, what? Where is this coming from?
It was funny too because I was working with one Chilean person and also knew a Spanish person in the kind of like tourist town we were living in. And then like really I would just like wasn't like learning any new like grammar or words or anything, but just by improving my pronunciation, everyone like thinks, well, your ability to talk is getting better, but they're like, wow, you're so good at Spanish. They're like, but it's like, it was like a couple hours of work and not that much actually changed about like the grammar or anything I knew, but it's funny to see that reaction in people.
Yeah. And people will speak to you. It kind of has these funny effects where, especially in Brazil, because I look Brazilian, you always have these awkward situations where, part of mimicry is always asking, what's this mean? How do I say that? So I go to people and I'll be like, oh, what is this? And I'm pointing to like a chair. But I look Brazilian and my accent's like perfect. And they're like, I'm just asking what's the word, how you say the word chair in Portuguese. And they're looking at me like I'm like I'm mentally sounding like.
Like, do you have amnesia? Or like, you aspire?
Like, what do you mean? What is that? Like, it was like a chair? Chair? Like, that's chair? Can you say that again? Chair? Like, what's wrong with you? So, so like those kind of things happen, or people end up speaking to you really fast because they assume you understand way more than you do because you sound good. But it's all fun. I love it.
And it's like a terrifying language moment, though, in my mind, when I've asked for something well, and then somebody just like rattles off Spanish at me, and I'm like, no, too much.
And one of the things I've heard you talk about is really how tied your identity is to the way you sound. And I think that going through this process of traveling South America for 6 months and trying to learn Spanish, you do really, like, it takes like some emotional risk to go out there and, at least at first, to start like being comfortable sounding like an idiot and not knowing how to, say the words to anything and having this kind of like awkward, bumbling conversation. And it seems like language learning is also kind of like a challenge for like assertiveness and an emotional challenge, as well as just a physical and memorizing challenge.
Yeah, I call it like emotional or like identity flexibility. So, people typically think of children as, better language learners, and they're definitely more successful. And but I don't believe it's true that it's because they have some, innate intelligence that we adults don't have. Which, because if you think about it, for the most part, like, we're categorically smarter than kids and everything else, And what the kids have as an advantage is those two things you mentioned. Either they they the kids have they have a phonemic advantage, so basically being able to hear and process sounds is easier for a child because they haven't like kind of they haven't crystallized their ears for whatever their native language is yet. But secondly, they haven't crystallized their identity. So, I have nieces and nephews now, and I like to fool around and just have them mimic random languages I say to them. And they do it without any sense of shame, And, but you do it with like a 18-year-old or 20-year-old, all of a sudden they have like shame and they feel silly. But I get my 6-year-old niece and I say Auf Wiedersehen in German. She's never heard German in her life, and she will mimic my intonation and have fun with it and stuff like that, and completely be not self-conscious about the whole process. So they have that kind of emotional flexibility because they don't have a sense of identity yet. Society hasn't like oh no, you're a girl, you're supposed to act this way. They're just kind of like just having fun, and I don't think that's human being adults have to be the way we are. I think we'd be better off if we kind of maintain some of these childlike characteristics. So I use language learning again as a way to kind of revert me back to my childhood and like not get me. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm Idahosa and this is how I am, but like it's like no, I can be whatever I want. I'm a grown boy, so. So, like, just keeping yourself childlike, I think language learning kind of humbles you a lot in that respect as well.
Do you think that moving to new cities, like you're doing, also contributes to that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in the new place I go to, I have a challenge of making new friends or other things. I particularly learned German this year because I realized that I had a lot of prejudices against Germany. I always thought it would be really boring. And then I decided that like as a kind of policy of mine from now on, any place I have just a unjustified or bias towards, I'm gonna go there just to prove myself wrong, which is exactly what I did in Germany. Like Germany was extremely fun, so yeah, like going to a new place, but you have to go through that challenge. That's what Brazil taught me. I went to Rio the first time. I didn't know anybody in Rio, and I went as a challenge to myself to see if I can thrive in a place where I didn't already have like the structures of school or work to kind of give me a soft landing. And yeah, I mean it's always very painful and stressful in the first part of it, but then once you get over the hump, it's extremely rewarding. Like everything else in life, that's challenging.
Yeah, definitely. Do you find like when you travel somewhere new, you make an effort to learn at least like some of the language, or are there places that you go to where it's not really like something that you do?
Yeah, I mean it's very easy to go someplace and just completely tune out, depending on your lifestyle. Like for example, Saigon, I've been here for months and I haven't, I know a couple of things in Vietnamese, but I put in no real effort into it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I don't want to learn a new language yet until I think my next project, I want to do something kind of big with the recording of it. So I'm kind of saving Vietnamese for that. Mm-hmm. But in Vietnam, it's just like there's a lot of expats here. Among the educated population, there's a lot of level English. And because there's so many foreigners here, when you do anything with taxis or people at restaurants, like I don't know, it just very rarely comes up that I can't do something because I don't know Vietnamese. So you definitely need to have a conscious effort to learn the language. Otherwise, you can just live there for years and not learn anything, as many people do.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I've been to Asia twice now, or Southeast Asia specifically twice, and I didn't learn very much of any of the languages. Like I spent a month in Indonesia last year and didn't really learn any words because I was around native English speakers the entire time, and everywhere I went, people spoke English. And I came home feeling like a little bit sad that I hadn't even learned, like that I didn't really learn like anything in their language.
Yeah, you feel like, and I think it's part of it because it's like, we just went there and like took advantage of all like the cheap stuff and like didn't even like make an attempt to get to know them a little bit better.
Yeah.
So yeah, like yeah, no, that's something I wish I would like to improve on. It just it takes time, and the thing is, because I'm a language guy, I like to do things like thoroughly and practically. I have little patience for learning a language without understanding its phonetics, and understanding the phonetics of like Balinese or Vietnamese, for example, would take me a good like weekend at least of research. Yeah, well,
I was
not
thinking
the
like a year.
Well, like because I have the background now in all this phonetic stuff, but just understanding the core principles of it, and then it would take me at least a few weeks before I can like really ingrain it. But getting the intellectual understanding takes me like a couple of days of just intense research and going out there because the current materials out there are always kind of inadequate. And I have to kind of make my own stuff up. So yeah, like I just never have time to do that. So all my friends here are trying to learn Vietnamese keep begging me like, dude, can you please make a Vietnamese pronunciation like course or something? Cause we're struggling, And, so yeah, it's tough, but I tell myself that eventually I'll learn them all. So no.
Learn them all.
Is Vietnamese sort of like up next with the Mimic method, or
in terms of my own personal learning, or in terms of
I guess like business and personal?
Definitely not business. We work our way down the ladder in terms of like the market. But personal, my personal goal this year is to achieve some things from a pure like cold-hearted business perspective that we're trying to do in the coming months.
Yeah.
And then, especially with like my team and business organization, then once I've finally freed up my own time, I want to learn a new language from scratch and record like the entire process and document it very thoroughly, and like publish it. And so then people can see each step of the way very clearly, and kind of I want to have like really clear evidence of how effective my technique is. So you can, because the thing is, other languages, I'll show you stuff and I've already started learning it for a while, so you don't see the whole learning curve. So I definitely want to do that for Vietnamese at some point, but the way timing is going to work out, I probably won't be in Vietnam, so it might be some obscure European language.
Other secret destination that we'll have to wait to find out about. Do you think there's some sort of like natural ability to learning languages, or what's your sort of belief around that? Because I know there's quite a few people in my life who are like, wow, like it's so cool that you learned Spanish. Like I wish I was good at learning languages. And I was like, I don't really feel like I have something that other people don't have. And I mean, I don't speak Spanish completely fluently, but I feel like when you put the effort in and you make the effort to talk to people, you pick up on it. It's just kind of what happens.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, what makes the Minh method philosophy is that like the ear and the mouth are at the root of everything. So the problem I try to solve in my business is, when you go and learn, Vietnamese, for example, it's kind of like, imagine you land in Saigon, you have cotton in your ear and, like cotton stuck in your mouth. So you can't really hear people clearly. And when you talk, you can't like really make the sounds clearly. So like our business is more or less taking that content out of your ears and taking it out of your mouth. So then you can do it. Once that's been taken care of, if you just follow a basic principle of going out there and mimicking people and listening to people and asking what's this mean and putting yourself out there fully, and you clock in enough hours of doing that, you will learn the language. But those two things are like hard. One is taking the cotton out your ears and mouth. For some people, that comes more naturally depending on the language. And just people, what it comes down to is people have varying degrees of like ear perception and the connection between hearing and pronouncing. People, like adults, have different levels of that, but anyone can be trained specifically to the sounds of a language. So that once you have that, from then it's just your willingness to go out there and, like Ryan said, with the emotional kind of aspect. A lot of people just don't have that, but it's not an innate skill. It's just like a choice. Like, will you put yourself out there and do this? And when people say, like, oh, I don't have the language learning gene, like every human being has a language learning gene. Like, think about it. Like, even people with serious mental issues, they end up speaking the language, like their first language, everyone who grew up in America learns English or Spanish or whatever your environment is. Like, no one's just like, oh, Timmy, yeah, he just never got it, and like now he just kind of mimes, and like, obviously there's people with speech impediments and other kind of things, but it's not really based on, it's not like speaking a language is not like being an NBA star where you need to be extremely talented at it. It's just like, you just have to do it. It's like shooting a free throw. You practice enough, you'll be able to make a free throw,
Yeah. Do you have a few more minutes for a couple questions?
Yeah, sure.
I'm curious to know, with your languages that you've learned in the past, like Mandarin, for example, do you find that there's decay over time with the sound system of that language, or is that more you experience kind of forgetting the vocab and the words, but the sound system kind of maintains?
Yeah, for sure. Like, for example, I haven't used Mandarin in a long time. And as a result, my Mandarin is not as front of mind. However, in my experience, best experience is my Spanish and Portuguese. When I learned Brazilian Portuguese, I completely lost my ability to speak Spanish. I could understand it still, but I would start a sentence in Spanish and end it in Portuguese every time. But then I went to Colombia and I relearned my Spanish, and I learned this kind of phonetic approach too. So, now things are a lot more cleanly segmented in my head. But, the point is, once you get to a certain level in a language, it's there, and to reactivate it doesn't take that much. So, for example, if I went to China right now, it would take me only a few weeks to restore myself back to what I was. Like, through a few weeks of intense kind of practice and mental activation. But, it's kind of like, what's a physical, if you've ever learned to juggle, I learned how to juggle when I was 13, and I don't juggle anymore. But if you give me 3 juggling balls, I'll get it. Or I haven't played basketball in years, but I can still shoot and dribble. So motor skills and language skills, they reside in a very, very, very deep part of the brain. So even though it might not be front of mind because you haven't used it in a long time, you can brush up and get it back very quickly, which is why I'm not very, I know a lot of polyglots or whatever, they have these crazy systems where they try to maintain all their languages, and I don't really have time for that. It's just for me, a language is just a tool for communicating with people. So if I'm not in a place full of Chinese people and I don't have that much need to communicate with Chinese people, then I don't need that tool. But if I go to Taiwan for a conference and I want to connect with Taiwanese people, then I'll take that tool out the shed and do my best to brush it up before I need it again,
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense.
Yeah, you touched on a point which I've heard you touch on other podcasts about kind of simplifying what a language is. I think a lot of people kind of get lost in the abstraction of it, this is English, versus just realizing that it's just kind of sounds that people are making. It's kind of accepted as convention to communicate meaning, but it's just really random sounds, and there's not some perfect right version of it.
For sure. Yeah, it's just I say, I encourage people to stop thinking about it like I'm learning a language, and think about it more like I'm learning a people, or I'm learning how to connect with a specific group of people. It just so happens to be that these people connect with one another through this language and through this set of arbitrary set of sounds. So yeah, like I said, people get obsessed with the abstraction of it, and then I think that's what pulls people's focus to abstract concepts like spelling and grammar and conjugation charts and things that are not really necessary to know in order to communicate and connect with people. So if you just focus your attention on your goal, it's like, why am I learning French? It's like, oh, because, you know, I have a French girlfriend, or because I'm going to Cameroon for a study abroad program. And if you just focus on what that intent is and not on the high level abstraction, and the Cameroon is a good example. Like, people in Cameroon will probably speak French slightly different than the way they do in Paris. So if you're learning French to communicate with Cameroonians, why are you mimicking Parisians? You know, so that's how I look at it. I focus on like local and people, and the abstractions are only there when they help me with that end goal of human connection.
Yeah, it seems like a really good perspective to take. One last question.
Sure.
You talked about how for quite a while since sophomore year, wanting to get to this point of being a location independent entrepreneur. How does the vision and like what you thought it would be like compare to what it is like day to day now?
What was my vision back then? Yeah, I've evolved a lot as an entrepreneur, especially like very recently, and it's an accelerating process. So there's compounding effects of knowledge, and things always go faster and faster. All I can really say to that question is that where I'm at right now has transcended my original ambitions. So whatever ambitions I had when I first became aware of that when I was 19 and I read 4-Hour Workweek, I had a limited sense of what was possible. And for me, it was just kind of like, I want to have the freedom to go where I want and do cool things. And I've been very fortunate to be able to do things while getting better at business fundamentals and, generating more, income and wealth that allow you to do even more things. And then what happens then is you achieve your first set of ambitions, and then you create a new set, and you achieve those, and then you create even more ambitious set. So I think if I told my 19-year-old self what my ambitions for 2016 are, he'd be like, whoa. And and I'm sure when my 2020 self talks to my 2016 self, I would be very impressed by that as well. So that's how I've always seen it, like this very upward trajectory. So yeah, I mean, I had the vision for what I like my life to be like when I read 4-Hour Workweek, and then I kind of realized it, and it's been extremely, extremely satisfying. So yeah, thanks for reminding me of that. It's good to reflect on those. Do
you feel like you've achieved as much freedom as you envisioned yourself having?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, let me think. I'm trying to think of where I feel limited. At this stage right now, I don't really feel any limitations. And like, not to like be bragging about it or anything, but like I just where I'm at right now in my setup, I can kind of do the things I've always wanted to do. The thing is, I don't have very big like material. I never had big material desires.
Yeah.
So my only real desire was just being able to make it happen, that if I want to go to Vietnam, I can go. Or if I want to go to this other place, I can go. And while I'm there, if I want to do, cool things and live comfortably, I can do it. So that I was able to achieve. And then now in the most recent development of my business stuff, I've gotten better at biggest kind of turning point in my life, I'd say so far, was hiring my first person like last year, and then developing management philosophies and which allows me to spend less time on work and more time on things that I actually enjoy, like creating things and coming up with visions and leading people to execute on that kind of stuff. That's really where I want to be at. And so yeah, I know it was a phase maybe like a year ago when I was kind of bogged down with work, but where I'm at right now, because I've evolved from a business perspective, I don't have that problem anymore.
Cool. It sounds
Awesome.
like you're living the dream for sure.
Yeah, I have no complaints here for sure.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
It's been awesome chatting with you.
And everyone should definitely go if you're embarking on a language learning project or just want something fun to do. Mimicmethod.com is definitely a place to start.
Yeah, for sure. I want to say one last point, and this is to everyone listening. If you have ambitions to travel and do all these things, like just do it. Like straight up. Like if I trace back all the things, when I first went to Brazil, like everyone thought I was crazy. You know, this is back before Brazil was sexy, before that movie Rio came out, the cartoon birds. And like literally everyone I told you I was going to Rio was like, oh my God, like they have AIDS and violence there. But I had a lot of like internal pressure not to go because I was like, maybe I'm making a mistake. But I just battled through it, and it was the best decision of my life. And I don't know anyone. I literally not met a single person in my entire life who was like, oh, I made a really tough decision to travel to this country, and I just totally regretted it. Like everyone who's ever traveled is always like unanimously like, oh, that was the best decision I've ever made. So like that's just pure statistics. So don't fight math. Like if you want to go somewhere, no matter who's telling you not to go, just do it. And like statistically speaking, you'll be very satisfied with that decision.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed that interview as much as we enjoyed being a part of the interview.
Yeah, definitely. Idahosa is super inspiring. He's once again re-inspired me to get back on the language learning train, which is something that I continue to hop on and hop off of.
Yeah, it has lots of good stories as well.
Yeah, and just really, really cool life that he's led. And I just love hearing him talk about surrounding himself with people who really support him. That's something that is a big focus of mine in my current life. So if you want to learn more about the Mimic Method, you can visit www.mimicmethod.com, where you can learn more about the program, perhaps get involved with it. It's a super fun way to learn a language, so definitely check it out. We'll have show notes as well as links and photos and that sort of thing up on the show notes at www.theworldwonders.com. You can send us an email at info@theworldwonders.com if you have a question, if you want to reach out, if you want to say hi. We love to hear from listeners out there, so definitely reach out. You can join the community on Facebook, The World Wonders, or Twitter, just search The World Wonders, and sign up for our newsletter on our website. It's like on our Facebook page, on our website, and we'll send you a free copy of a super cool ultimate guide to South America that we have available for free for a limited time.
As always, thank you for listening.
Bye.